Speeches are important. An example. In 1987, Susan Inslee from Bellefontaine, then Vice President and one of my fellow associates at Honda of America Manufacturing, HAM, noticed a speech in the Congressional Record by then Congressman Mike Oxley. She thought it was a very good speech, and she set out to find who had written it. On her next visit to Washington, Susan met the author, our speaker today, Tom Shoup, a political science graduate of Miami University who had worked for Congressman Tom Kindness and was then working for Congressman Mike Oxley. She invited him to come to Marysville and visit Honda. That's when our speaker last week, Executive Vice President Shige Yoshida, and I first met Tom. It wasn't just a visit. He was offered a job as Coordinator of Government and Community Relations, which he began in March 1988. On his first day on the job, Tom attended and helped with the groundbreaking for the East Liberty Auto Plant, the first element of Honda's 5-part North American strategy that Mr. Yoshida laid out last week. Tom's now more than 30-year career at Honda picks up just where Mr. Yoshida's speech ended. It has been some career. By 1990, Tom was manager of 2 different departments at HAM, the only HAM associate I know of to have ever headed 2 different departments at the same time. In 1993, Susan Inslee and I changed Tom's career completely when we asked him to move to Japan with his wife Lisa and infant daughter and become senior manager of HAM's North American Task Group resident in Japan. He spent 2 years there. Soon after his return, he was assigned to the East Liberty plant as senior manager of the Manufacturing Planning Group. He became East Liberty's plant manager in 1988. 2 years later, he was promoted to vice president and moved to HAM's larger assembly plant as plant manager at the Marysville Auto Plant, the greatest plant in the American automobile industry. I know, I spent years there. In 2011, Tom, by then a senior vice president of HAM, moved with his family to Lincoln, Alabama, as president and CEO of Honda of America Manufacturing of Alabama, which produces light trucks and engines. Tom returned to Marysville in 2014 and is today the 3rd American to serve as Executive Vice President of Honda of America Manufacturing. Mr. Yoshida ended his speech last week with Honda's announcement in 1987. We are establishing here in the United States a self-reliant motor vehicle company. For 30 years, Tom Shoup has played, I was going to say, an extraordinarily important role, but in truth, an absolutely essential and critical role in making that commitment a reality. I'm very honored to have the chance today to introduce to Columbus Rotary Executive Vice President of HAM, Tom Shoup.
Wow. I think you could be done with the speech at this point, Scott. I think you reminded me of so many things that I think I had forgotten about, and made me a little bit tired and made me feel old at the same time. But to add to that, not only did I just celebrated my 30th anniversary at HAM. My wife and I just celebrated the birth of our first grandchild. So things come in bunches, right? So yeah. hopefully she'll be able to carry on some tradition at Honda in the future. But anyway, thanks, Scott, very much for your kind words. Obviously, Scott and I worked together for a long period of time, and I have great respect for Scott, and he mentioned Susan Inslee, and of course, Mr. Yoshida, who I consider to be a dear friend of mine and an inspiration, all three of them. And Scott, I have to say, I know you're enjoying retirement, but some things never change. Like with this Rotary invitation, you call me up and tell me when to show up and what we're going to cover. It's just like the old days. I love being here, and I would have been here anyway, but when Scott told me, I automatically jumped to it. I remember that. But seriously, Scott, Susan, Mr. Yoshida, and others invested greatly in me and many other people. And I want to say thanks to you guys for that. But I have a lot of great memories working with Scott. And as I said, he invested a lot in me personally. And I appreciate all that mentorship, Scott, that you provided, not just me, but so many people at Honda. And since we're doing a little bit of a look back historically, I thought I'd start off with something you all might enjoy. I don't know the last time Scott played tennis, but here he is with a racket at a line-off ceremony at our East Liberty plant in 1991. Not sure about his form, but maybe, Scott, you have a little more time to work on that with your trainer. Anyway, and I know that Mr. Yoshida spoke here, as Scott said, about a week ago about the early history of our company and really extraordinary history, and I hope most of you were here for that. He had a very unique place, as Scott said, in Honda's history in America overall, and especially related to our company and what's become the hub of North American manufacturing here in Ohio at Honda of America. We call it HAM. And Mr. Yoshida, if you will, was kind of the right arm of our first two presidents in Ohio. He's a soft-spoken man. Those of you that were here last week may have seen that. Hasn't changed a bit since the first time I met him, I don't think, last time I saw him. But he's very wise and a great mentor to many Honda associates from all over the world, but particularly here. And a lot of us who've become leaders of our company here in Ohio had the opportunity to be mentored by Mr. Yoshida, as well as people in other Honda operations around the country or North American region. So Mr. Yoshida was actually working in the U.S. before HAM was established in 1977. And I love talking about 1977 and 1980 with our new hires. That's one thing I love, and I ask them to tell me, how many of you were born in 1977? And don't ask me where I was in 1977. But think about that. 1977, the world was different, a lot different. This state was a lot different. Scott mentioned in my background, I worked for two different congressmen in Washington. One reason I went to Washington is because I really wanted to. I wanted to experience that there. But another honest reason was it was hard to get a job. I was one of those people who left the Cincinnati area because I thought I could find some gainful employment somewhere else. And that's what a lot of people did back then. A lot of people left the state. Well, anyway, that's my little diatribe about the 70s. But I think Mr. Yoshida helped lead the study of whether we should go ahead with the plan, and if so, where would we build the plant? In this photo, that's Yoshida-san there, second from the right. In the photo, he's pointing to our global president, who's known as Mr. Kawashima, exactly where the first plant would be built. And that's Mr. Honda himself there, kneeling on the ground, maybe inspecting the dirt or something else there, I'm not sure. He was a very detailed guy. But as you can see from the beginning, Yoshida-san was literally right in the middle of the action. He was right in the center of everything. And you wouldn't know that unless somebody like me told you, because he doesn't talk about himself that way. But the bold decision, and I want to stress again, this was a bold decision to locate our operations in this part of Ohio or in anywhere outside of Japan. And it was driven off of some key precepts and philosophies that we have as a company. One of those is to build products close to our customers in America. And this was the first big step by Honda management and led to the establishment of all of our production operations and our base here in Ohio. In fact, Next year, we're going to mark our 40th anniversary of the start of production at the Marysville Motorcycle Plant, and that happened on September 10th of 1979. 40 years of manufacturing in Ohio. From the beginning, though, there was a plan to build cars in America, and I always heard stories about this. In fact, as the story goes, after the first motorcycle rolled off the assembly line, the plant received a fax message from Honda Motor in Japan, and we didn't have text messaging and iPhones back then. Right? And I wasn't personally there for this, but nevertheless, a fax message came in. How many of you remember fax messages? Come on, some of you. I had to tell my daughter what that was, actually. But a fax message came in from Honda Motor which read, and I quote, "Proceed with automobile production," end quote. Pretty bold, pretty bold. In fact, I heard Mr. Yoshida tell a story one time at one of the events that they had. They announced that they were going to, after they started motorcycle, they were going to build cars in Ohio. And he said he can remember people chuckling out loud, thinking, "You guys are crazy. You're going to build cars here." And then he said, "Well, after that, we're going to export them to Japan." And they laughed even a little more. I mean, who could imagine? I remember, you got to take yourself back in the 70s and 80s, Back to the Future machine. But nevertheless, it looks easy right now as a decision, and that was a very obvious thing for us to do. But back in the early 80s, you wouldn't say conventional wisdom led to the decision to build the Accord in Ohio. And one of the advantages in the early 80s was the perception that products made in Japan were of generally higher quality. And many experts thought it was particularly risky as a move to let Americans build Honda products in Ohio. In fact, some of our own dealers in the country were concerned that building these cars here would negatively impact the overall company's brand and reputation for building products of the highest quality. Think about that. Biggest concern, biggest risk, biggest question that we had was, could American people build quality that's expected for the world? And that always blew me away as something that was significant. But then and now we had a challenging spirit, that's what we call it, and it's guided by a focus on our customers. And this is what led us to move ahead with the plan to build automobiles in Ohio at Marysville, in the greatest plant in the world. And what Honda brought to the industry was a different approach to manufacturing that eventually touched almost every automaker and supplier. And I remember clearly from my earliest days with Honda how the industry considered our operations to be the benchmark for auto production in North America. We opened our doors to the leadership of factories from all over, including the Detroit automakers, not to mention hosts of other groups that would come by. And we also went out and spent a lot of time talking to community groups and associations and engaging ourselves in the community. But a lot of our competitors wanted to tour the Marysville plant, the greatest plant, to understand how we were building such high quality vehicles in the United States with a high level of efficiency and flexibility. And I can tell you that continues to be something that we talk about with competitors all the time. But we introduced to North America just-in-time parts delivery and rolling model changes, where it seems like the old model is 1 or 2 car lengths away from the brand new model when we change over the line. Looks very seamless, but it takes a lot of work to be able to do that. And we do it all without a production shutdown to be able to achieve the model change. But we focused on a flexible and efficient approach to manufacturing with continuous improvement and teamwork between our associates and our suppliers to meet customer expectations for quality and value. So when customers saw that Honda's American workers could build high-quality vehicles, other international companies followed us from Europe and Asia. And today there are about 10 international brands that are building vehicles in the United States. The Detroit automakers also improved their quality and productivity to compete more. And today the quality of almost every vehicle that's produced in America has risen to the highest levels we've ever seen. So I think you could say that we were a real trailblazer for the auto industry. But the drive and the direction for much of our actions from that first stage, I think, can be traced back to an announcement Honda made in September of 1987, an announcement that Scott referred to and Mr. Yoshida talked about. As he mentioned, we called it our 5-part strategy for North America. And I believe it was made on the back of a placemat from Bob Evans. That's my little tidbit, Scott, and I actually saw that placemat more than once, actually. Ms. Inslee kept it nearby, and I didn't believe her at first, but she showed it to me. So that's one thing I loved about Honda when I came to Honda, was everything was fast, and ideas were free, exchange was honest, and it was really different from me coming from Washington. Ding, ding, we need a gong for that one, right? Anyway, I'll leave that one on the table there. But this is kind of where, as Scott said, Mr. Yoshida left off last week, and where I'm kind of going to begin. And I'll be done by 3. Is that all right? I'm telling my story here, all right? So, but I joined Honda, as Scott said, in 1988. Right after that announcement of the 5-part strategy, and we were just beginning to pursue the visionary strategy, like we announced the strategy, and now it's time to put legs under it and build the activity plan to achieve it. And the impact to our business and our supplier network since we launched the strategy has been huge. And as Mr. Yoshida explained, the 5 parts of the plan called, and I'm going to repeat them real quick, a second auto plant in Ohio, or the East Liberty Auto Plant as we now call it, which Scott said was one of my first projects to support. The creation of a new R&D center in Ohio where many of our cars and light trucks are now developed. The expansion of what we call production engineering in America, which involves creation of unique production tools and dies used in our plants. A plan to export U.S.-built Honda vehicles, including shipments back to Japan. People stopped laughing at the point that we did that, by the way. And a major increase in our parts sourcing efforts in North America, which led to location of countless numbers of suppliers here in Ohio and throughout the North American region. So it might be difficult for some of you to appreciate just how kind of out there this strategy was at the time. Very unique approach by a very unique company, and especially when you consider what's happened with Honda and the industry ever since this strategy. But it clearly was a visionary plan that targeted an incredibly aspirational goal to achieve self-reliance for operations in North America. And believe me, we talked about what that word or hyphenated word means endlessly in terms of our operations and how we've developed them. But let me expand briefly, and I will try to be brief, on each aspect of this strategic plan. Part 1 was the establishment of ELP, as we call it, East Liberty Auto Plant, our second auto plant in the U.S. and our third in the region. We had a Honda plant in Canada that opened in 1986. The East Liberty plant was and is a true model of innovation. It was the first auto plant in America to use waterborne paint to reduce environmental impact, and it was our first plant in the world to build cars and trucks on the same production line. The East Liberty Auto Plant also heralded a new era of growth. To put it in perspective, in 1990, the first full year of production at East Liberty, our cumulative auto production was 2.3 million units. And this was based on just 2 models, the Accord sedan and the Civic. And today, our cumulative production from 8 Honda auto plants in North America stands at over 34 million vehicles. It's based on the production now of 14 different models. That's part 1. Part 2 of the strategy was creation of what I call the new R&D center in Ohio, where many of our cars and light trucks are developed. And we established local R&D in Ohio because of its close proximity to our Marysville auto plant and the campus, and to the planned East Liberty plant, which was just a crow's fly away, and to the Transportation Research Center of Ohio, which Governor Rhodes and the state of Ohio had established more than a decade before. We call it TRC, but it's one of the things that originally attracted us to this part of Ohio. So as a part of the 5-part strategy, Honda purchased the TRC from the state of Ohio in January of 1988. And importantly, we constructed the agreement for that purchase to allow other automakers and suppliers to continue to use the TRC for research. Moreover, we established a relationship so that the Ohio State University was a major beneficiary of the operations, as $6 million from the sale of TRC went to the College of Engineering at Ohio State to establish what we called a Transportation Research Endowment Fund. And TRC has continued to operate as an independent testing and research facility with profit from its operation funding other endowments at the College of Engineering. So to date, more than $54 million have been generated by TRC, which has gone into the endowment program at Ohio State to support and advance transportation research. Some people call this our Michigan strategy. Susan used to say that all the time. Shoop, this is our Michigan strategy. You guys get that, right? We got to take them on everywhere. So anyway, Honda has a really strong and ongoing relationship with the College of Engineering, and we're actually expanding and developing that further into many different areas. But TRC has really proven to be a valuable asset to our R&D engineers over the years. And in fact, 1 year ago, we announced a new investment of $124 million to enhance world-class testing facilities at TRC and to establish a multifunctional aeroacoustic wind tunnel facility to advance vehicle innovation. I challenge you to say that 3 times quickly. But nevertheless, that's one of the projects we're doing. So our local product development efforts began in 1990 with the first generation of the Accord Wagon, which Scott was involved in and will remember well. And maybe some of you remember this product. I hope you do. But based on the completion of the new R&D center in 1993, local product creation really took off from there. To date, Honda R&D has created about 30 vehicles in America, with current models designed, developed, and engineered in America, including the Acura NSX, the MDX, the RDX, and the TLX, as well as the Honda Civic, Pilot, and Odyssey products. So in particular, R&D in Ohio is now the leader for light truck development in our company, and we'll expand that role for global customers in the near future. And this includes supporting light-duty trucks for China's growing luxury market as well. The latest example is the all-new Acura RDX, which is going to begin rolling off the production line at ELP tomorrow. And as a matter of fact, and it'll be introduced subsequently in China. And we're really excited about that product. Part 3 of the strategy was the expansion of production engineering in America. Honda Engineering North America is based in Ohio as well, and we look at it as somewhat of a secret weapon for Honda. Our founder, Mr. Honda, established a strong culture of innovation, and this didn't apply only to our products, but also to the machinery used to produce them. He believed that production technology is the essence of creative manufacturing. And in the 1950s, he came to the U.S., including here to Ohio, particularly in Cincinnati area, to purchase a lot of equipment from machine tool companies. He wanted to buy the best and learn from the best. And he bought those machines, and his engineers broke them and tried to explain why they broke and how to make them better. Mr. Honda understood that to create the best products, he needed the best equipment. And believe it or not, some of those original milling machines are still in operation at Honda Engineering in Japan. But even the best equipment couldn't give us the competitive advantage that he wanted, so he created unique machine tools to execute our manufacturing philosophy. And this led to the establishment of Honda Engineering in Japan, and with the 5-part strategy, led to Honda Engineering North America here in Ohio. So this proprietary company now designs, develops, and manufactures stamping dies and specialized production equipment for Honda manufacturing operations in this region, including things like weld systems and assembly automation. Part 4 of the strategy was a plan to export U.S.-built Honda vehicles, and we began the export of the Accord sedan in 1987. And the next spring, we went full circle and began exporting the Ohio-built Accord Coupe to Japan. And this was a powerful statement to the entire industry about what we had achieved in a short time in Ohio. Honda clearly marketed the Accord in Japan as an import from the United States. Imports were not popular in Japan at that time. And this badge shows an American Eagle and Honda of America manufacturing imprinted on it, and that badge was affixed to every one of our exported vehicles. So this program contributed greatly to Honda's success in Ohio in so many ways, but one way was our team was challenged to meet the demanding expectations of customers in Japan. And we really heightened our focus by this opportunity on quality and flexibility. And ultimately, with products exported to more than 100 countries and the various regulatory requirements and different customer needs, our associates were asked to build multiple variations of Accord and other models on the same line. So this really elevated the ability of our people, our Honda associates, to cope with flexible production, which has become so important to survival in this industry today. And Honda now has exported more than 1 million cars and trucks around the world from Ohio. The fifth and final part of the strategy was to increase our parts sourcing efforts, and that led, as I mentioned before, to the location of a number of suppliers in North America and Ohio. But as you can see from that slide, you look at the history of our parts purchasing efforts, the strategies we pursued to increase production in the region had an incredible impact on the growth of our parts sourcing efforts. Other than the period following the global recession in 2009 and the impact of several natural disasters that we had in 2011, year after year we've steadily increased our spend with our local suppliers. And just for the sake of comparison, Scott mentioned 1993, so in that year after ELP was up and running, our cumulative parts purchases in North America stood at $3 billion. Today, our cumulative purchasing total has reached $415 billion. Quite substantial. Last year alone, we purchased $32.4 billion in parts and materials from 736 suppliers in North America. So Ohio is obviously a big part of that. We have 180 what we call Tier 1 suppliers here in the Buckeye State. And today, Honda purchases more than $10.3 billion in parts from those companies. So I want to emphasize, though, beyond the business results of the five-part strategy had a huge impact on the growth and maturity of our people, our young associates who today are taking responsibility for creating new products and making key management decisions affecting the future of our company. And I want to acknowledge the role of Scott in this effort. Like me, he was an outsider to the industry, came to Honda from some law firm, most of you probably know, which was doing a lot of legal work for Honda in that incredible period in the 80s. And Scott, one thing that impressed me about Scott was how he embraced Honda's corporate culture, and as much as anybody tried to ensure that Honda philosophy and corporate culture were deeply understood by every associate. And in order to have that serve as the foundation for our ability to make Honda products of the highest quality and to give opportunities to associates like me to grow in the company. So now, as Scott said, I'm not an engineer. I'm not a political scientist either. I did work for Oxley, and I get blamed for socks a lot. He's the ox in socks, as you know, or he was. And I didn't join Honda with any idea that I would make a career working on the manufacturing side of our business. And after all, as he said, I had a political science degree from Miami of Ohio. The guy that helped me with the speech said, "Political science." I'm not going to say it that way, but most people reacted that way. And after working in D.C., I joined Ham, as Scott said, in 1988 in corporate planning, a mere 30 years ago. And my career, as he said, included being plant manager of the East Liberty and Marysville auto plants. And during my time at the Marysville plant, I was able to oversee a major innovation project where we scrapped and replaced our entire welding system and completely reorganized our assembly line without any shutdown, which was amazing. It's why I used to have this thick head of hair and all that sort of thing before that happened. I'll tell you an interesting story about that. I remember telling my father when I was at East Liberty as the manufacturing planning leader, he was very sick, and I went to see him, what turned out to be the last time. And I had just found out that they were going to ask me to stay at ELP, and they told me in advance. And I was sitting on the bed talking with him, and I said, Dad, I got something to tell you. You're not going to believe it. And he's like, what is it? And I said, well, Honda, those guys, they asked me to stay at East Liberty, and they want me to be the plant manager. And it seemed like silent for 5 minutes. He didn't say anything, and then he leaned his head over and he goes, are you kidding me? And he said, you wouldn't even change your own oil when you were doing it. I said, Dad, I don't think plant managers change oil anymore. But I had the same reaction both at EOP and at Marysville 2 years later when I got that question. It's automatically, are you kidding me? I can't do this. Are you crazy? And you apply yourself and do your best. Anyway, as Scott said, I was president of HMA, and I was the first non-Japanese to hold that type of position, which created a lot of funny stories I'll save for later. But and I'm not sure if he mentioned this or not, but I couldn't get my family to come back from Alabama. So they're still there, and I'm working here, and we're making that work, but it's a challenging commute for us. But anyway, I don't want to read you my resume, but I think hopefully you have a question in your mind that how does a guy with a career in political science end up in charge of manufacturing operations? Are you kidding me? And the answer has to do, I think, with the unique and powerful corporate culture we have at Honda. In 1989, after I joined the company, Mr. Honda came in, and that was during his induction in the Automotive Hall of Fame in Detroit. And I understood that he could be challenging to work for, and there's lots of stories about that for another time too. But Mr. Honda also recognized the importance of communication and the need to inspire and motivate people, and particularly his associates. So he spent several days with us. He toured our factories, and Mr. Honda had a keen interest in people and technology. There were a lot of nervous people about what he might think when he toured. He's very unique. He's both an engineering genius and a communications genius, and he had a passion for making things. And his goal was to serve people, to make their lives better as a mobility company, and this was totally obvious as he toured. There's a famous photo here of Mrs. Honda riding on the cart with Mr. Honda, holding on to the back of his jacket as he reached out to greet associates. It was her job to keep him on that cart. Everywhere he went, people were showing appreciation, but his goal, more than anything else, was to show his appreciation. And the one thing I remember, Scott, from that whole time is he would stand and he would look at people and raise his hands and say, "Domo, domo," about 1,000 times. And he couldn't say it enough. And that means thank you, or I love you kind of thing. But anyway, he even did that to the governor. But basically, I'm reflecting on this now because I think this is the kind of people-focused company we created in Ohio with the help of Mr. Yoshida, Scott Whitlock, Susan Inslee, and others. They wanted to make sure that our associates learned the Honda way, as we call it, not just as a philosophy, but as a way of doing business, a way of working together as a team and building incredible products for our customers. So in the 80s, there were a lot of experienced engineers who came to Japan from Ohio to share their expertise with us. And I recall when I joined Honda in 1988, some people thought we had too many Japanese engineers in America, but it takes a long time to train and educate people and to steep them in our unique corporate culture and then create an environment where they're able to and expected to contribute their own ideas. So I think this approach worked well and served as a power behind our strategic focus to advance self-reliance here. As Scott said, the assignment that altered the course of my career, my understanding about Honda, about how people and technology might work together, came in 1993. I was asked, as he said, to become senior manager. That's me and my wife and my daughter who just had the granddaughter. It's hard to believe how fast the time has gone, but nevertheless, I was in charge of this program for a 2-year period, and basically, I think management's goal in creating this program was to help all of us here to understand what a challenge it was to live and work in a foreign culture, the way that Japanese engineers had done in the first decade of our history here. And even though the focus was on new model development, basically my role was to coordinate the activities and keep the whereabouts of all the associates and their families. But through programs like this, we not only learned the Honda way, but we were able to apply it and help teach others about the Honda way when we returned to our operation. The first generation of these associates became the teachers, helping the second generation in places like Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, Indiana, and other locations to understand the Honda way. And when we started up the plants in Alabama and Indiana, it was that strong foundation at Ham and hundreds of experienced people from Ohio that went there as teachers and helped start those operations. So anyway, we'll always have people that are going to live and work in Japan, just as we'll have Japanese who will live and work here. And especially related to projects that support production of global models where development's based in Japan. But much of the activity of growing and advancing our people and the skills of our people in Ohio and North America is still centered here. And this is not only new model, but technical development activity. So to help our associates develop their skills required to stay at the forefront of the technological change, we made bricks and mortar and equipment investment in Ohio. We established a training center for powertrains at Anna, and then another one for vehicle assembly in Marysville at our Museum and Heritage Center. And you all, by the way, are invited to visit. In addition to looking at our training center, we have a really, I think, fantastic museum there, and we'd love to host you out there at the Heritage Center. But anyway, these reflect, these technical development centers reflect the huge investment that we're making in our people. Anyway, right now we're at kind of a crossroads in technology, particularly with deciding what kind of technology is going to power and create new value for the vehicles that you and others might buy in the future. And we're entering what we call an era of electrification and intelligence technologies that are key to connectivity and automated vehicles. And this is really going to have a profound impact on our operation here in Ohio. And you may or may not know this, but globally we announced our intention to have 2/3 of our sales come from electrified vehicles by 2030. That's a huge, almost shot to the moon type of statement that our president made recently. And I think with the lower fuel prices and a growing preference for SUVs, a key challenge is how do we make that electrified product appealing and tasteful for customers like yourselves. So that's why our electrification initiatives focus on trying to make technologies that make these vehicles more mainstream in application and great vehicles at the same time. The majority of our offerings right now are hybrids or plug-in hybrids and that sort of thing, and you get a lot of great performance, efficiency, and value without compromise in those products. But in our Clarity series and the Accord Hybrid and Insight coming to market just this year, you're going to see vehicles that are broadly appealing. The design's improve, the performance is improved. They'll have premium features and packaging and be able to comfortably accommodate up to 5 passengers. So I think demonstrating our commitment to electrification, we're building the Accord Hybrid now in Marysville, and we're assembling the hybrid battery unit at Marysville for both the new Accord Hybrid and also the Honda Insight that's about to go in production in Indiana. So we're underway, and this place is going to be the hub of that development and that technology. So we've also implemented a new organization to try to improve our focus on manufacturing characteristics, and a lot of the changes are complex in the organization, so I won't spend much time on it, but I will tell you that Honda of America, or HAM, has been established clearly within the Honda structure as the regional leader for production and related technology, development, execution, and implementation. And we're going to work with our global operations to strengthen that coordination globally. And we've established something we call Manufacturing Tech Division to help us do that here in Ohio. So all in all, a lot of these changes underscore our commitment to manufacturing improvement for today and tomorrow here in Ohio and in this region. And they're going to enhance our ability to move with speed and create new value for customers going along. So anyway, to sum it up, our production operations in Ohio began, and the foundation of the company was not buildings and equipment. The foundation we built was on our associates and how to grow and teach our associates the importance of customer satisfaction with a high level of teamwork and a commitment to making the best use of resources. And this is very important, and a passion and motivation for overcoming challenges. And this culture continues to serve as the foundation for our success that we've been fortunate to have, and also the growth that we see in the future. So more than 30 years after the five-part strategy was announced, we continue to advance along the basic path that it established. It doesn't mean we're standing still, but after almost 40 years of building products here in Ohio, our challenging spirit is alive and well, and we continue to invest in Ohio, and we pursue new initiatives that advance every aspect of our operations here. That's a kind of final tribute to Scott, Mr. Yoshida, Susan, and the many others who've invested so much in us. But I really appreciate your attention this afternoon. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them, but I understand you have a time commitment, but I don't. So feel free. Thank you.
Appreciate that. I'll open up the questions now. Sorry, it's a little bit. Oh, no, you did great. You did great. Thank you, Tom, very much for coming here today and sharing all of this with us. Also, thank you for Honda's commitment to Ohio. It's a big deal to a lot of the people in this room. As I've said before, every Rotary meeting will be special. You just have to show up to find out how it will be. So you'll want to do that next Monday. We have Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court, Maureen O'Connor, will be here to speak, and we hope you join us. Thank you.